The vodka-soaked voice on the other end of the line cut through the 2 a.m. silence like broken glass. Ben, I need you to do something for me. $50,000. Cash. Tonight. Ben Mullen set down his drafting pencil and rubbed his eyes. 15 years of friendship with Calvin Wise had taught him to expect the unexpected, but this call felt different, darker. Cal, you drunk? Go to bed. I'm outside your house. I need you to sleep with my wife. 3 minutes later, Ben stood in his doorway, staring at the couple on his porch. Calvin's designer suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot but focused with an intensity that made Ben's skin crawl. Behind him, Kelsey Wise stood perfectly still, in a red dress, her expression unreadable. Between them sat a black duffel bag. Calvin unzipped it, stacks of $100 bills neatly bundled. "You've lost your mind," Ben said. "Listen to me." Calvin's hand trembled as he grabbed Ben's shoulder. "Someone's blackmailing me. They have photos, doctored photos of Kelsey with you. Hotel rooms, cars, places you've never been. They're threatening to send them to everyone. My business partners, my family, the media." Ben's mind raced. He'd never been alone with Kelsey, not once in the 5 years she'd been married to Calvin. That's insane. Just prove they're fake. "I tried. The metadata's been altered. They look real." Calvin's voice cracked. "The blackmailer wants $200,000, but I have another plan. If we create real evidence tonight, documented, with witnesses I control, with you willingly involved for money, then I can prove the other photos are fabrications. I'll have timestamps, my own security footage, a proof of payment. It destroys their narrative." Kelsey finally spoke, her voice flat. "We're desperate, Ben." Something in her tone sent ice through Ben's veins. This wasn't desperation. This was rehearsed. Ben had met Calvin during their sophomore year at State, 2 architecture students bonding over late-night design projects and shared contempt for pretentious professors. Calvin was brilliant, charismatic, always working an angle. When Ben started his custom motorcycle restoration business after graduation, Calvin had been his first investor, pumping in $20,000 without hesitation. But Calvin's own architecture firm struggled. 3 years ago, Ben started noticing things. Calvin taking calls he'd immediately silence, expensive watches appearing and disappearing. The manic energy of someone riding a high followed by days of hollow-eyed exhaustion. Gambling. Ben had suspected it, but never confirmed it. Then, 6 months ago, Ben's uncle passed away, leaving him a warehouse property in the industrial district worth $1.2 million. Ben sold it, paid his taxes, and suddenly had capital he'd never imagined. Calvin had been thrilled for him, or so it seemed. They'd celebrated with whiskey and stories about the old days. Now, standing in his living room at 2:30 a.m., watching Calvin pace while Kelsey perched on the arm of his sofa like a predatory bird, Ben understood. This wasn't about blackmail. "Let me think about it," Ben said carefully. "This is a lot to process. Come back tomorrow night. Sober. We'll talk." Calvin's jaw tightened. "The blackmailer's deadline is—" "Tomorrow night," Ben repeated, his voice firm. "If this is real, one more day won't matter. If you're truly my friend, you'll give me that." After they left, Ben sat in darkness, his mind assembling pieces. No blackmailer would go through the trouble of creating fake photos without a ransom demand Calvin could actually pay. The story had holes, and Kelsey's presence, her silence, the way she'd looked at his house calculating something, it felt wrong. He pulled out his laptop and started digging. By dawn, Ben had found the first crack. Calvin's architecture firm had filed for bankruptcy protection 3 months ago, quietly, with minimal press. Creditors were circling. But more interesting was the property Calvin had purchased last year, a commercial building in a gentrifying neighborhood, or mortgaged to the hilt, the kind of property that would skyrocket in value if the owner suddenly had capital to develop it. Ben called an old friend from college, Wade Gardner, who now worked as a private investigator specializing in insurance fraud. "I need you to run background on Kelsey Spence before she married Calvin Wise," Wade called back within hours. "Interesting lady. Birth name Kelsey Spence, but she's been Kelsey Thompson, Kelsey Morrison, and Kelsey Chen in the past decade. Each marriage lasted under 2 years. Each ended in divorce with sizable settlements. The Morrison case is particularly juicy. He claimed she fabricated an assault to increase her settlement. Case was dropped, but there's a paper trail. Ben's stomach twisted. Send me everything. That evening, Calvin returned alone, looking worse than the night before. The performance continued. I have the plan worked out. My security system will record everything, you and Kelsey. Then I show the blackmailer I'm not afraid to go public with the truth, that you and I made a business arrangement, nothing sordid, completely above board. Where's Kelsey? Ben asked. Home. She's embarrassed about all this. Calvin wouldn't meet his eyes. Look, I know it's weird, but you're the only person I trust. You're successful now, Ben. You have everything. I'm drowning. Just help me this once. There it was, the resentment, bitter and sharp, finally showing through the friendly mask. Ben leaned back, studying his old friend. I'll do it, but I have conditions. We do this my way, in my space, with my recording equipment, and I want the money up front. And plus a written contract stating this is a lawful transaction between consenting adults. Calvin's eyes lit up with something that might have been triumph. Done. Tomorrow night? Tomorrow night. Wade arrived the next morning with a portable security system and a grim expression. This smells like a setup. What's your play? Insurance, Ben said. He'd spent the night drafting a contract so airtight it would make any lawyer weep. The document explicitly stated that Kelsey Wise would engage in consensual acts with Ben Moulin for a fee paid by her husband, Calvin Wise, with all parties of sound mind and legal consent. He'd included clauses about recording devices, witness statements, and liability waivers. More importantly, he'd built in a trap. Hidden in the legal language was a clause stating that any false allegations of assault or coercion made after the contract's execution would constitute fraud and extortion, punishable by immediate legal action and financial penalties equal to triple any damages sought. They're planning to claim assault, Wade said, reading over Ben's shoulder. Classic honeypot. You're alone with the wife. They have footage. She screams rape. You're arrested. Calvin gets a restraining order, freezes your assets during litigation, and bleeds you dry in legal fees until you settle. They walk away with enough to cover his debts, and then some. That's my guess, Ben agreed. But they're amateurs. They're not thinking about documentation. He'd also hired Wade to plant additional cameras in his workshop, was independent of any system Calvin might tamper with. Audio and video, hidden in the vintage motorcycle parts that decorated his office. And he'd sent copies of Wade's investigation to his lawyer with instructions to release everything if Ben didn't check in by midnight. When Calvin and Kelsey arrived that evening, Ben's workshop was perfectly arranged. Soft lighting, a table with the contract and a notary public Ben had hired, a retired judge named Wilson Crawford who owed Ben a favor and enjoyed watching entitled people squirm. What's this? Calvin's smile faltered. Protection for all of us, Ben said smoothly. Judge Crawford will witness and notarize. Everything legal, everything documented. Exactly what you wanted, right? Proof this is a legitimate business transaction? He watched Kelsey's face carefully. The mask slipped for just a second, fury flashing in her eyes before she controlled it. This seems excessive. Not if someone's really blackmailing you, Ben countered. This proves intent, consent, and lawful exchange of money. It's bulletproof protection. Unless... He let the word hang. Calvin recovered quickly, too quickly. No, you're right. Smart thinking. He signed with a flourish. Kelsey hesitated, but Calvin shot her a look and she added her signature. Judge Crawford notarized with a knowing smile, then excused himself. Ben handed Calvin his phone. Call off your outside cameras. What? The ones you have trained on my building. Whatever backup surveillance you planned. Turn it off. We use only my system or no deal. Calvin's face went red. Don't insult me. Ben's voice went cold. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you really think after 15 years I don't know when you're lying? The room went silent. Kelsey stood, rage finally breaking through her careful composure. You sanctimonious. I know about your previous marriages, Kelsey, Ben interrupted. Thompson, Morrison, Chen. I know about the assault allegations. I know about your pattern. He turned to Calvin. And I know about your bankruptcy, your gambling debts, the property you need capital to develop. Calvin's hands clenched into fists. So what, you going to help me or not? No, Ben said quietly. I'm going to watch you both leave, now. You signed a contract, Kelsey shrieked. A contract for services not yet rendered. Judge Crawford's voice came from the doorway. He'd been listening, as Ben had asked. Mas, and given the clear evidence of fraudulent intent, that contract is void. But the admissions just made are on record, as is your attempt to fabricate evidence for a false assault claim. Wade emerged from the back room, holding a camera. Got every word. The next hours blurred together. Calvin and Kelsey tried threatening, then bargaining, then finally fled, when Wade mentioned he'd already contacted the district attorney's office about an ongoing fraud investigation. 2 days later, Ben sat in a coffee shop across from Andrew Walters, Calvin's primary creditor and the owner of the commercial property next to Calvin's. Andrew was a shrewd businessman who'd suspected Calvin's desperation might lead to something criminal. I appreciate you documenting this, Andrew said, reviewing Wade's evidence. Calvin approached me last week trying to sell his property at twice market value, said he had capital coming. I smelled a rat. What happens now? Ben asked. I'm buying his property in the bankruptcy proceedings, at fair market value, which means he'll walk away with nothing after his debts are paid. Andrew smiled grimly. As for Kelsey, the Morrison family is very interested in this new evidence. Turns out they never stopped believing she'd fabricated her allegations. This could reopen their case. Ben should have felt triumphant, but mostly he felt tired. 15 years of friendship gone. But then he remembered Calvin's face in his living room, the resentment, the entitlement, the absolute certainty that Ben owed him something simply because Ben had succeeded where Calvin had failed. Wade joined him after Andrew left. You know they'll try to spin this, make you the villain. Let them try. Ben pulled out his phone, scrolling to a voice message from Judge Crawford. The judge is writing an official statement about the attempted fraud. Between that, your investigation, and the recorded confession, they've got nothing. Calvin's bankruptcy will proceed, his creditors will be satisfied, and Kelsey's looking at fraud charges if she's stupid enough to pursue anything. 3 weeks later, Ben learned Calvin and Kelsey had separated. She'd fled to Nevada. Calvin was working at a small firm in another state, his reputation in tatters after the fraud attempt became known in professional circles. Ben's phone rang one evening. Unknown number. Ben? Calvin's voice, small and broken. I wanted to say I'm sorry. And I was desperate and stupid, and I let her convince me it would work. You let yourself convince you, Ben corrected quietly. You saw my success and decided I owed you. That's not friendship, Cal. That never was. Silence. Then, I know, I'm sorry. I hope you get help, Ben said, and meant it. For the gambling. For whatever made you think this was okay. He hung up without waiting for a response. 6 months later, Ben stood in his expanded workshop, admiring a restored 1947 Indian Chief motorcycle. His business was thriving. The warehouse property money had funded a second location. He'd hired 3 new technicians and had a waiting list of clients. Wade stopped by with coffee, a habit they'd developed since the incident. Kelsey pleaded guilty to fraud charges in the Morrison case, he said. 18 months probation. Restitution. She's done running. And Calvin? Still in Ohio. Quiet life. Working on his sobriety from what I hear. Ben nodded. He didn't feel vindicated exactly. Just free. Free from the weight of a friendship that had been rotting from the inside, built on unspoken resentments and one-sided loyalty. His phone buzzed. A text from Judge Crawford. Drinks next week? I know someone who wants to invest in vintage motorcycles. Might be interested in partnering. Ben smiled. Real friendship, real opportunity. Earned, not extorted. He texted back, absolutely. Outside, the sun set over the city, painting his workshop in gold light. The Indian Chief gleamed, a beautiful machine restored from rust and neglect to something powerful and true. Not unlike himself.